So now I'm going to start with a story from last night. So yesterday was the band banquet, and we went to the band banquet, and I had forgotten about this. It was getting late in the afternoon, and I was so hungry. I've been watching basketball games nonstop since about Tuesday. Like the TV hasn't really been off since about Tuesday. And I was so hungry, and I'm like, when on earth are we going to have dinner? And then through some context clues, I realized, I have to leave the house and go to a band banquet. I don't get to stay home and watch basketball games. So I ate a bunch of Planters peanuts. I mean, any Planters peanuts, guys? Like salty, I like salty peanuts, right? And then through some other context clues, I realized, Brendan is babysitting somewhere tonight, and she is not going to be done till midnight, and she has a Cinderella license. She would not be allowed to drive home. And through additional context clues, I was able to determine that it was my responsibility to get her home, and I did. But through that time, I've been distracted by basketball, I've been distracted by Planters peanuts, and I've been distracted by band banquets and picking up children from babysitting gigs. And I would tell you that this lesson for me, while I've been looking forward to it so much over the last several weeks, it did not come together smoothly for me. So to that end, I just want you to be forewarned. You may have a lot of questions. Whenever we're done, there may be things that I did not articulate as fully as I would like to. I may not have been as clear as I would want to. Is that a Buc-ee's bag? Oh, okay. Is that? Do you want a Buc-ee's? No, has anybody been to Buc-ee's? Does anybody know what Buc-ee's is? Let me just do an advertisement. If you ever go south, and by south I mean Texas, there is a version of Sheetz which is Walmart, and it's called Buc-ee's, all right? And this is their little logo, right? And I was at the Buc-ee's outside of Dallas Motor Speedway, and I have never been to a gas station that had 100 gas pumps at it. But this Buc-ee's had 100 gas pumps. It's a sight to behold. My dad and I went in there years ago, and they had this deli counter, but it was filled with nothing but beef jerky, and as many flavors. It was like the Baskin Robbins of beef jerky, right? And he had a hard time making a choice there. But I don't know how I could figure that. How did I catch that from just that bag stuffed in the side? But anyway. Let's get started. I told you it's going to be a train wreck this morning, right? That's where we are. Let's get started with our core values. Every week we start with core values, and we like to start out with Jesus' core value, and we know that Jesus always valued people. People, right. Now at Cochrane Community Church, we have 8 core values. Those core values are Bible. I heard prayer. My hearing's not real fast this morning. Bible, prayer, what else? Worship. Service. Community. Oh my goodness, relevancy I heard. Outreach. And Cheryl, I did hear you say stewardship. I just am not that fast to catch up. All right, now when any groups of people get together, they have values as well. What? No, I'm not that far. I'm not that far, Steve, right? The first rule of comedy, timing. That's what it comes down to, right? But there were people in Chapel Hill that got together last night that had the core value of Tar Heels, and they were disappointed last night. I'll just have you know. But to that end, when any groups get together, they have core values. When this group gets together, we have 2 core values. One of those, Steve, is timeliness. Thank you so much. And what is the second core value that we have? Growth. We all want to get better, right? We want to become the people that God designed us to be. Now, next thing I have is logistics. Next week, it's going to be a repeat lesson, and it's going to be the myth of risk. This is going to be one of my favorite lessons. I did this lesson last fall sometime, and I neglected to record it, which means I need to record it again. And we're going to do that next week. The week after that, I believe, somebody can check their calendar, but I believe it's Easter. And if we get to Easter, we are not meeting. We're not here that day. We have special hours, so we're having two services, one I think at 9 and the other at 10:30, so it's going to be a little bit different. We're not going to be meeting that week. We will be back the week after, but I have no idea what we're teaching on yet. I have no idea. But it'll come to me. We'll get it figured out. Maybe you'll be asking for a new teacher, but we'll see how that today goes. So with that, today I want to go over something that has, I don't know, I guess it's stuck out to me quite a bit here over the last several years. And I want to make sure that we're using the tools that God gives us appropriately. Do you all recognize that God's given you certain tools? He's given you different things. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't know that I even had this tool. I had no clue that this was a tool that God gave me, and so it's my intent this morning to help unpack that. Our topic today is the topic of imagination. Imagination. Now, I would hazard a guess that this seems to be a rather unusual topic to be looking at on a Sunday morning, but I will do my best to make this make sense. Now, I will start off, I use the word sense. God has given all of us certain senses. As a matter of fact, He gave us 5 senses. What are those 5 senses? Hearing. All right, well, this is like slower for hearing. And did I hear touch? What else? Sleep, did somebody say? That's smell. There we go. Taste, yes, sir. Sight. What we can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. Gave us 5 senses. God gave us 5 senses. Now I'm going to tell you, it took me till I was 40 years old for somebody to say this to me. Jess, you know God gave you 5 senses, but did you know He gave you 6 mental faculties? That was the response I gave. I was like, what? We have 6 mental faculties. This is our I don't know. This is our toolbox. God gave us a toolbox, right? And what is in those, what are those things that He gave us in our mental toolbox? The first one is memory, right? Who here has a memory? We all got a, some of us may say it's better or worse than, right? Doesn't work like it doesn't work like it used to. All right, I'll give you that. Another tool that we have, another mental tool, is perception. How do you perceive something? I used an example, and if I was back doing slides, I would pull this up. Have you ever seen a picture that looks like 2 faces or the candlestick? Right? That's your perception, and with your brain you can toggle back and forth with that. There's ways that you perceive things. Third one is reason. This was actually my word of the year a couple years ago, reason, because I recognized I was using that mental faculty incorrectly. I had to get better at it. The fourth one is will. And will is not willpower. You've probably heard of willpower. But will is the ability to focus. I'll actually put that in parentheses here. You have the mental faculty to focus. Have you ever really locked in on something and really been dedicated to something? That's the mental faculty of will. The fifth one I have is intuition. Have you ever got a feeling? Have you ever gotten that feeling, that little nudge? That's one of your mental faculties. And the last one is imagination. God gave us these 6 tools, and I'm not going to go through all 6 of these today. Maybe we'll save those and we'll spread those out as we go forward. We'll see how this lesson goes, right? But I think with this, I just want to review a few things. I'm going to give a few different topics that we're going to put out here on the table, and my intent is that it all comes together by the time that we're done here this morning. But have you ever had a good idea? Like men, you're allowed to look at your wives and ask permission. Have you ever had a good idea? And has anybody ever had a good idea? Couple of you will admit to having a good idea, right? Have you ever had a good idea and then not acted on it? Yeah, we probably all have that, right? Have you ever had a good idea, not acted on it, and then somewhere down the line you see somebody else has actually done that idea? Has that ever happened to you? Yeah, I think it's probably happened to most of us, right? Has anybody here ever watched the TV show Seinfeld? Right, a few of you have seen Seinfeld. The character of Kramer, every episode, like there's a formula for that show. Every episode, Kramer shows up and he's got a new idea, Jerry. Jerry, I got this new idea. I think it's in one of the first episodes. He comes in and he's like, Jerry, I got this wonderful idea. It's a pizza place where you make your own pizzas. You remember that? There was one. And like there's a restaurant that you do that now, right? Has anybody ever been to a Blaze Pizza? You walk in there and you're like, I want a pizza, and you tell them everything you want on it, and 3 minutes later you got your pizza, right? But I'll tell you, there was one episode of Seinfeld when Kramer comes flying into Jerry's apartment, and he's like, smell my arm, Jerry, smell my arm. What's it smell like? You know, what episode is this? What's it smell like? The beach, right? And what does he do? He takes this idea for something that smells like the beach, and he takes it, I think it was to Calvin Klein or somebody, and is like, hey, this is a wonder new fragrance, and he gets thrown out, and that doesn't go well. And then a few weeks later, he finds out that Calvin Klein is selling his fragrance. And do you remember what they're selling it as? The ocean. The ocean. That you know, he's saying that was my idea, right? He was looking at that. Here's something I want you to understand about good ideas. Good ideas come from God. Good ideas come from God. And I'm going to tell you what, if that good idea comes from God and you don't act on it, you know what he's going to do? He's going to give that good idea to somebody else. That's what he's going to do. Right? That's how it works. And we have a special term. And those of you who have been with me a long time will probably recognize this. This is a little mini lesson that I like to do. When we get this idea from God, some may say you become inspired. Has anybody ever been inspired before? Steve gets inspired. I see a few heads shaking. Now, the wonderful thing about the word inspired is that it is a compound word. It is made up of in, and I think the Greek or the Latin form is spiro, which means in the spirit of. And I'm going to tell you, when you get a God idea, you are inspired. And I have learned that the way to spell inspired is with a capital S. That you have God's Spirit that's given you an idea. You are inspired. Now, there's often times that these ideas come and we don't capture them, right? Because the fact of the matter is when those good ideas come, you're typically not in an ideal place. Now, I hope I'm not telling stories on anybody other than myself, but has anybody ever had a good idea in the shower? Like, it's a little more difficult to handle a good idea in the shower, and by the time you get out, like, you can forget. Like, you have to write it in the steam on the door or something, right? You know, you got to do something with it. I would tell you this, I've had good ideas while I was driving. Right? Some of my best ideas, I've had good ideas on the lawnmower, right? When your hands are busy but your mind is free and God says, I'm going to give you that idea. I'm going to inspire you, right? But sometimes they come to us in places that are other than convenient for us to accept them, right? And I want you to think about this. Where was Moses when God inspired him? He was in the wilderness, talking to a bush on fire. That's a rather unusual circumstance to find yourself in, to be inspired, is it not? Is it not? Now, the secret is that when we are inspired, we need to capture and we need to nurture this idea into what I will call a desire. Right? Now, desire is also a compound word. And again, those of you that have been with me for a while will recognize this lesson. D can mean not, but it can also mean of the. In sire, I want you to think of the word sire genetically. When you sire something, you father something. A desire is something that you want to give birth to. You want to give life to. And I'm going to suggest to you this little mini lesson I call inspired desire, but and I actually gave it away there. You want a capital S. You want to be in the spirit of doing something that is of the Father. You want an inspired desire. Now, this is where it starts. When we get an idea, we want to seek to honor the Father with the execution of the idea. God gives you an idea. What are you going to do with it? He gave me an idea a month or a month and a half ago. Teach about imagination. I have no idea how to do it. I still don't know how I'm doing it. I'm in the middle of it right now, right? But I want you to consider this story. Michelangelo. Now, what was Michelangelo's chief occupation? Anybody know? He's famous for a couple of things. He's a famous artist, right? He's known for being a painter, right? But being a painter, like he did the Sistine Chapel, right? Sistine Chapel. But understand this, as great as he was as a painter, that was not his love. Michelangelo's love was to be a sculptor. Completely different discipline within the arts, right? And so he is hired. He is hired to sculpt the statue of David. What an honor. What an honor to be given that. But this is the issue that Michelangelo has. What does David look like? What does David look like? And so the story goes is that he has this chunk of marble, and for 3 months he stares at this chunk of marble. And one day, let me see if I have the name here. The story goes, one day the bishop who hired him walked by and yelled at him, "Get to work." Can you imagine how that could happen? You know, like that seems a reasonable thing. Guy's been staring at a slab of marble for 3 months and hasn't seen any progress. He hasn't seen any progress. And Michelangelo replied, he says, "I have been working this whole time. I'm envisioning what David looked like." You see, Michelangelo was later quoted to say, "I saw the angel in the marble and carved until I set him free." You know, he had there was no picture, there was no painting. Like, there wasn't even a stick figure of David, right? All we had are some stories. That's all he had to go on. And so what was it that allowed Michelangelo to sculpt the statue of David? And I'm going to suggest to you it was the mental faculty of imagination. Imagination. Now, at the root word, when you think about this word imagination, understand the root here is image. Image is at the root of this. It's we want to make something seen. Michelangelo had to use his imagination to make David seen. And we need to use our imaginations to bring the ideas that God gives us forward, to make the ideas that God gave us seen as well. Now, before I go further, I want to point out that these ideas can be anything. God gives good ideas to all sorts of people. They're not all grandiose. They're not all Statue of David type dreams, right? I have God gives the dream of the Israelites getting out of Egypt to Moses, right? A pretty important dream. But I'm going to also suggest to you that he gave Mr. Reese's an idea to put peanut butter inside a chocolate. And I'm going to suggest to you that was a pretty important dream too. All right? I'm like, the world is a better place because of Reese Cups, is it not? Like, it is. There's different types of dreams. So don't judge the dream that God gives you. Don't say, oh, God, he gave me this Reese Cup dream. Why can't I lead the people out of Egypt? No. God gives you the gift that you're supposed to have. Will you be inspired, and will you turn that into a desire? Now, you've probably also heard me talk before. So we've talked about the 5 senses. We've talked about the 6 intellectual faculties. I've introduced those to you. You may have heard me talk before, and I've done a couple lessons or even mini lessons on the 7 laws of creation. So 5, 6, 7, right? 7 laws of creation. And one of those laws is the law of polarity. And the law of polarity is the law of opposites. Now, I know I've talked to you about opposites before. The opposite of up is, the opposite of wet is hot, left, wrong, right? There's inside, right? Opposites. We know this, right? We have these different things. There's a couple things that I want you to understand about the law of polarity. We've talked about this before. What's the opposite of physical? Spiritual or mental, right? There's something. And because of this, what I want you to understand this, everything you see has been created twice. Created first in here and then out here. The chair that you're sitting in was created twice. Somebody was given the idea that we needed a chair that looks like this. The idea was created twice. First in the head and then in the world. Right? That's the way it goes. Everything is. We need a mental picture. We need some type of blueprint to work from. I have this note. Every building that you have ever set foot in first started out as an image, right? It started out with a blueprint. There was some blueprint given to be able to make a building. And I would hazard this guess. If you go into a building that had no blueprint, you will not want to be in there for long. That's probably a pretty dangerous place to be, right? Think about it. You don't want a building that's just been tossed together. I think an example of this is if you go, I believe it's Exodus chapters 25 through 40. We're not reading that this morning, but I'll just point you in that direction. You'll find that this is when God is giving Moses the blueprint for the tabernacle. He's given him the mental picture that will later become physical. everything is created twice. Everything's created twice. Now, there's also part of polarity which is good and bad, right? So I've done the stick man with you before, right? This is our head. And we have our senses up here. These are our 5 senses. This is how stuff comes in. But we also have to recognize that while good ideas can come in, has anybody ever had a bad idea come in their head? 2 of you have. 2 of you have had bad ideas. All right, next, you know what? The week after Easter, we're going to have a lesson on honesty. The lesson's going to be about honesty because we've all had bad ideas, right? Where do bad ideas come from? They come from outside too. We are in a spiritual world, right? And we have bad ideas that come into us as well. We have ideas that come to us that say, you're less than, you're not enough. You wouldn't be thinking that thought about yourself. There is no benefit to you thinking negative thoughts about yourself. Those negative thoughts come from the outside in, and sometimes they take root down here. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do. Now, I'm probably way off my notes here, so let me see where I'm at here. We can have good ideas from God, or we can also have bad ideas. Bad ideas come from the enemy, and the enemy can send those thoughts through our senses as well. So we need to be vigilant. We need to be vigilant on those ideas and those thoughts that come to us. And oftentimes these negative thoughts are about ourselves. The negative thoughts we get are not always about going and destroying buildings or something. The negative thoughts that we get are often about ourselves, are they not? I'll just share some of the negative thoughts that I've had. Some of the negative thoughts that come to me are, who do you think you are? You ever had that one come at you? Who do you think you are? Who's going to listen to you? Why would you think you could do this? And it's not new. It's happened since the beginning of time, right? We actually witness this. If we were to read through the story of Moses at the burning bush, God says, Moses, I've got an idea for you. And Moses says, who am I? He had some negative thoughts inside of him. He tried to throw water on that fire. Your mind is very much like a garden. We're coming into springtime. Who are my gardeners in here? We've got a few gardeners in here, right? Okay. Your mind is very much like a garden. It will only return what you plant. You do not plant a seed of corn and expect a tomato to grow from it, do you not? Like produces like. And this is way back. Turn with me, if you would, Genesis chapter 1. And for those of you that like to underline things, I'm going to give you some stuff to underline here. Now, remember how some of you were unkind to me when we started and you were like, we were doing core values and you just tried to bury me with core values and I wasn't fast enough? Well, I'm going to try to bury you with this, right? This is where we are. So Genesis chapter 1, verse 12. The land produced vegetations, plants bearing seed. Underline this, according to their kind. Continuing on. And trees bearing fruit with seed in it, according to their kind. Fast forward here, verse 21. So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living thing with which the water teems and that moves about in it, according to their kind. Verse 24, the wild animals, each according to its kind. Verse 25, the wild animals according to their kind. The livestock according to their kind. All the creatures that move along the ground according to their kind. Like begets like. Like produces like. Have you ever seen a pregnant dog and thought to yourself, I wonder if I'll get a batch of cats out of this? You don't think that. If you think that, there's drugs in the pharmacy for you. You know this. You know this in the physical world. You know this in the physical world. But the law of polarity says that what happens physical first happens in the spiritual or the mental. Don't miss that. Don't miss that. You cannot have negative thoughts and produce positive results. You want to have brain surgery, you want to go to a brain surgeon who's thinking a bunch of negative things. What do you think your chances are in that endeavor? I wouldn't take my chances there, right? Right? That's where we are. So we need to recognize that when this takes place in the physical world, it also takes place in the mental and the spiritual world. It takes place here as well. One of the more famous stories in the Bible is the story of Abraham going to sacrifice Isaac. Who's heard that story? Right? We're going to look at how this is told in the book of Hebrews. So turn with me, if you would, to the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11, we're going to look at verses 8 through 12, and then 17, 18, and 19. It reads, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as an inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so, from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. So this has given us the background of Abraham. Like, he is late in life, and now finally he's got this son of promise. Verse 17, by faith Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. Abraham reasoned, mental faculty, right? Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. And so, in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. Abraham had to have some imagination to say, if this is what God's wanting me to do, he'll figure out a way to make this work. Like a garden, you've got to weed it and you got to feed it. You got to weed and feed your garden. You got to pull out the bad stuff, you got to throw that away, and you got to put the good stuff in to make it grow. And feeding your garden, feeding your mental garden with positive ideas is something that we call faith. We call that faith, right? Now, we have this positive thought, and it comes in here, and we have this positive thought floating around in our head, but we got to plan it. We got to internalize it. We've got to push it down here into our subconscious. And whenever we do that, we have to mix that the inspired idea with the desire, and it comes down here. It becomes this thing that we want to grow, that we want to make that work. But now to make this happen as a result, How do you do this? How do you take some idea that God has given you? And let's just use our example of Moses. Let's use our example of Moses. Act on it. How do you act on it? What's our lesson today? You got to use your imagination. You got to use your imagination, right? We have to use our imagination to take these things that God's given us to be able to make them real. And sometimes it's like stuff that's not obvious. And the Bible is full of imaginative solutions, is it not? I have a couple here. Let's say that you were marching into the promised land and there was a walled city. What would your plan be? One plan was to march around the city, and the walls fell. Right? One time, the Israelites were being oppressed, and the way to get out of it was to take fewer soldiers into battle and take them with trumpets and torches. And the enemy fled. Is that the right word? Flew? I don't know what's... Fled. Thank you. I need help. I need a lot of help up here, right? You know. How about this? You have a Philistine giant taunting you every day. You got to have a little imagination to say, I think a slingshot's what I got to take to this fight. There's some imagination in there, is there not? And we could find other examples. I just wanted to give you a couple of those. Now, within imagination, how am I doing? I'm probably doing horrible time-wise here. I'm doing way bad time. Maybe this will be a continued lesson. There's two types of imagination. The first type is synthetic. The second type is creative. Now, synthetic is taking something that you've seen somewhere else or other things that you've had, and you start to put these together, right? Think of Legos, right? You can have a bunch of Legos, and you can put them together in a different way, and you can synthetically imagine something new. Or the creative part is you come up with the idea for Legos, right? That's where we are. Synthetic imagination is when you rearrange old ideas and put them together in a new way. Synthetic imagination involves rearranging and combining existing ideas, concepts, or elements in a new and innovative way. So some examples of synthetic imagination may be Coke and Pepsi, right? Similar, not the same, right? Some of us would say, not the same, right? But you also then you have the different flavors, right? You got Coke and you got Sprite, or Mellow Yellow, or Dr. Pepper, or whatever your flavor turns out to be, right? It's just a little tweak. It's a little tweak, right? Creative imagination involves the generation of entirely new ideas, concepts, or visions that have not been previously experienced or conceived. It's the ability to imagine and conceptualize entirely original possibilities, often transcending conventional thinking or boundaries. Creative imagination taps into the depths of the mind's creativity and intuition to envision new world solutions or artistic expressions. The creation story is a beautiful example of creative imagination. Right? Everything was new and complex and diverse as we go through this, right? As you go through Scripture, there are several times where we are encouraged to do something new or to look for something new. I'll just give you these. We're not going to read them because we're very short on time. But Psalm 96:1 and Psalm 98:1 says, "Sing to the Lord a new song." Create something new. Create something new. Jeremiah 31:31 says, "The day is coming, declares the Lord, when I will create a new covenant." I'm going to do things different. I'm going to do things different. It's an entirely new way. I would suggest to you that Noah's Ark required some creative imagination to figure it out, right? We had to be very, very imaginative like that. And remember, our mind is like a garden. You plant the seeds of an idea, but it takes time for them to grow and mature. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. Now, when we apply imagination, either creative or synthetic, we develop plans that make these ideas real. So when we do this, we have some imagination that works. And Bob, this is for you. The way it happens is through intentionality. That says intentionality if you can't read the chicken scratch. It's intentionality that makes it work. Now, it's been a long time since I've taught intentionality. Maybe we need to come back and look at that again. It's one of the most transforming principles that I've experienced in my life is being intentional. Being intentional is life-changing. And I know. But as we go through this may take a lot of time. It may take a lot of time. We have some time that happens here. And because there's some time involved in this intentionally imagining and trying to bring things forth, we need to also have faith. We need to also have faith. And here's the reality. Sometimes a plan will succeed right away, and sometimes there's failure. Sometimes there's a lot of failure. Right, I told the story last week, Moses failed how many times? He failed all these times. At the men's prayer group, somebody shared one morning that Edison failed like 1,000 times to invent the light bulb. Right? Sometimes you got to go through some failure. And you got to have faith as you go through that failure. You got to be intentional as you go through that failure. And there's times that we can become impatient. Has anybody here ever dealt with impatience? I think we all have we not? We have all dealt with impatience. Here's a note for you. Impatience is the death of all imagination. Impatience is the death of all imagination. So, I just want to be considerate here. I've got just a couple of things here that I want to share with you. With our imagination, and again, the root word of imagination is image. It's image. We need to develop a clear picture of what we're going towards. In Hebrews, it talks about how Abraham had that. He had this picture. He wasn't sure how he was going to get there. God gave him this great idea. Hey, you're going to be the father of nations. At the time, what do you think Abraham believed about his possibility of being the father of nations? I'm going to suggest to you that was a big negative. That's what I would suggest you. He had a hard time doing it. But over the course of day after day, week after week, year after year, as he developed that relationship with God, this became a little bit faint, and eventually this became like super faithful. He believed it. He believed it. So when God says, hey, Abraham, I got this crazy thing for you to do. Go sacrifice your son. He still believed. He didn't know how, but he still believed. Now, I have just a couple of things that I wanted to, all of that was background. I had two things I wanted to challenge you on this morning. One is, how often are you using your imagination? Are you using your imagination? Because you see, as I started to learn about this, as I started to think about this, I was like, I ain't got much of an imagination. Like, we've all been to the birthday party where the kid opens up the gift and is more interested in the box than the present, have we not? Nobody else has seen this. Like, the kid's like, turning the box into whatever, right? And doing all these. Like, what a beautiful, example of imagination. What's my imagination? I don't know. They're mental faculties. They are tools. They are muscles. They don't go away. Sometimes you need to exercise them, though. Sometimes you need to exercise your imagination. So I don't know what type of God idea you may have today. I don't know. But I do want to challenge you with this. I want to challenge you to go to the gym. Some of you have the T-shirts or have seen the T-shirts that say God's Gym, right? Well, I think part of God's Gym is let's take just a little bit of time to imagine, how can I make this happen? And you do this, and perhaps this is where you start. You set a timer on your phone for 3 minutes. How do I make this happen? And that's all you think about for 3 minutes. And whenever God says, hey, you know what? How about you do this? And it may be something crazy. He may say, get a torch and a trumpet. He may say, walk around the city. But write it down. Write it down. Maybe even do it, right? Maybe even do it. See what happens, right? You need to be open for that imagination to happen. Now, some of us are really good with our imagination, but we get it all screwed up with the law of polarity, because the only thing we use our imagination for is this. What's the worst thing that could happen with this? Where are my doom and gloomers at? You're in here. I know it. Oh, now you're not going to, okay. We're, like my grandmother loved worst case scenarios. Like, hey, I got accepted to college. I'm going to go to Pittsburgh. Oh my goodness, like people die in the streets in Pittsburgh every day. Well, I don't know that that's necessarily true. But like that's the way some people think, right? Grandma, forgive me for that. That's probably not exactly your words, but I know that was in your heart, right? That's the way it was. That's the way it was. Like, so how are you using your imagination? Are you using it in the positive, or are you using it in the negative? And I want to encourage you today, use it in the positive. Use it in the positive. Take those ideas that God's given you and say, how can I make this happen? What are some ways that I could do this? And when the negative stuff comes in that says, who are you to be playing with an idea like this? You say, buzz off. And you can even be more forceful than that. I give you permission. I give you permission. God gave you an idea because He wants you to do something with it. Now, how you do it, it's going to require some imagination. It's going to require some intentionality. It's going to require some faith. But that's what we're looking at today. So let me just your imagination is a muscle. It can get stronger and it can get weaker. So set aside time to exercise this muscle regularly. When you exercise it, make sure you exercise it in the wrong way. Has anybody gone to the gym and done the exercises the wrong way? Like, that's not good, right? Far too many of us exercise our imagination in the negative, imagining worst case scenarios. Use your imagination to envision a better future for yourself and for those around you. Don't squander your gift on doom and gloom. That's what I had for you this morning. I trust that this was a minor train wreck for you, that there may have been something here that you found some value in. And I will wrap up, as I typically do, with ACT on the board. Based on what you have learned today, what action will you make? Or what action will you take? What change will you make? And is there something that you learned today? Is there something that you learned today that you can teach to somebody else for your sake and theirs? And that's what I have for you this morning. Questions, comments, or answers?